Meanwhile, tonight, as we look back at the NATO summit, we are left with images of very little by way of unity and a whole lot of dissension, right? Big headline is that many in the alliance may be questioning why they even exist except to propagate antiquated concerns. In fact, French President Emmanuel Macron actually said as much when he suggested the reason NATO was created is really no longer a threat.
Qui est l'ennemi?
Who is the enemy? This is the question we need to address. When the alliance was created, the answer was simple. Russia, the USSR. Things were happening that way. They changed 30 years ago. Does anyone around the table say Russia is an enemy? I do not think so.
Joining us now is Governor Jesse Ventura, governor of the great state of Minnesota, from which I hail as well. Proud to say it. Golden Gopher.
Golden Gopher.
That's right. Golden Gopher.
And I never even went there.
No, but you're just as proud to be a fan of the Golden Gopher football team.
I'm a Minnesotan born and raised, so, you know, but I chose to go in the Navy instead of to college.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to go a little far afield from Minnesota and go into places like Europe where the President of the United States is discussing NATO with foreign leaders. And I don't know if you've been following it, Governor, but that thing has turned into a debacle. They're arguing amongst themselves, and now they're trying to figure out, why is NATO really even necessary? Because NATO was essentially designed to keep the Russians out when it was the Soviet Union.
Yep.
Soviet Union doesn't exist. It was also designed to keep Germany down. Hitler's been dead, as last I checked, for at least a long time, and to keep the United States in. Why do we need NATO?
Wait, I'll tell you how good it is now. We just had the big thing on Normandy, right? The anniversary of Normandy. Do you know what I found very unusual?
What's that?
The Germans got invited and the Russians didn't. Now, excuse me, the Russians were our ally in World War II.
They actually won the war.
And yes, absolutely they did. Let's not pull punches.
Right.
They faced way more than we did.
26 million
and
dead.
Second of all, last time my parents fought against the Germans.
Yeah.
And we invited them to Normandy.
It was a bit odd to see that, wasn't it? We're going to have a celebration of World War II between the Germans, the Americans, and the Brits and the French, and we're not going to invite the Russians?
Yeah, and especially for me, who both my parents are World War II veterans.
Yeah.
And my father talked about meeting the Russians in Berlin.
You can hate the Russians all you want, but in the end, you can't deny the truth.
Exactly.
And that's the point that you're making.
Exactly.
But, you know, it seems to me, I had a conversation.
Now let's get back to the...
Well, I had a conversation yesterday with Alex Mihailovich, one of our correspondents, who made the point that much of the money, whether we give it to them or NATO spends it, these billions of dollars that are spent by NATO to try and keep the world safe, most of it, whether it comes from America or doesn't come from America, comes back to America because all it's doing is feeding a self-fulfilling prophecy. We need a machine in place to continue to sell and use weapons against countries, and those countries change, but in the end, it's all about this, right?
Yeah, it's all about the military-industrial complex. It's about our U.S. economy today, which unfortunately we've allowed to become war-based. We got to have a war going on to support the military-industrial complex, which supports all these jobs in 50 states, they've done this, creating the work to continue to make weapons, and we continue to sell those weapons throughout the world. They eventually get used against our own troops down the line. They'll be shot back at us. And then the money situation's hilarious. We give money to NATO. NATO then buys the weapons from us and essentially gives the money back to us.
It's a win-win, isn't it?
You know, it's a win-win for the military-industrial complex, and it's a lose-lose for you, the taxpayer.
And NATO now being used in places like Libya, places where governments are destabilized because we decided we're on one side and not the other side. That's not to say that we don't sometimes pick the right side, but to go around the world constantly, as we just did in Bolivia, as we did recently in Honduras, and removing democratically elected presidents or officials and leaders because we don't like them. Just
doesn't sound very American, does it?
It doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And using NATO
kind of makes you want to go take a shower as an American.
What do you mean?
Well, you feel filthy when you look at something like that. I do as a veteran. I hang my head in shame.
But that's not to say we can't, from time to time, be adventurous when it comes to helping countries around the world. My problem with it, and maybe yours too, is it seems like we don't check with Congress, we don't check with the people, the media doesn't talk about it, we don't even know when these things happen, we find out afterward.
Yeah.
That's what's most troubling,
well,
right?
That's the secret state that General Fletcher Prouty wrote about in his famous book. Is that our government is not run by the elected officials. It's run by the entrenched bureaucracy who they do things, and things are already moving on it to where the elected official comes in, has to accept it, otherwise they'll look stupid. How could this be happening, and why didn't I know about it? Because it's already happening underneath. They learn about it late. All the elected. So this keeps going on. It doesn't matter who gets elected. The secret, as he called them, the secret team.
And this goes back to what you and I were talking about in a recent conversation. The reason a lot of these officials manifest whatever it is these giant industries want, in the biggest example, it is, in fact, the military complex that pays off most of the people in Washington, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or in the Senate or in Congress. War is one thing you will see them in bed together on. I mean, look at right now. But if they question it, they won't get the funds.
Who just reaffirmed the Patriot Act? The Democrats.
Yeah.
Of all people, the Democrats. So that tells you right there, when it comes to war, there's only one party.
The Green Party.
Yeah, the money party. It's called, as I like to quote the great Major General Smedley Butler, war is a racket. A two-time Congressional Medal of Honor winner.
You get very passionate about this, which is why we love to have you on. The great Jesse Ventura, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.